This is Matt Butler from the Ithaca Times. I am sitting here with Brian Clasby, an independent candidate for the New York 23rd Congressional District, challenging incumbent Tom Reed.
Right.
So Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about your campaign so far?
Well, so far I think it's, I feel like I've just gotten started. Started getting out and meeting people. Just filed with the FEC recently, so I'm an actual candidate now. Feels pretty surreal, to be honest. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And what is sort of your main motivation for running?
Well, I guess my main motivation for running is that I don't really feel as though, our representatives in Washington are representing me or the people of the district. And I think we need somebody to do that. And I'm basically running on the basic platform of anti-partisanship. I feel like the political parties themselves and the fighting and the acrimony between them has become more of what they're doing there than representing the people or trying to solve issues for us. And so the way to fight that is to not be a part of either party.
Okay.
So.
And now we've talked before about how, being a centrist can be sort of a disliked position. People think you're not taking a strong enough stand. So how would you respond to that sort of thing?
Well, I think that's exactly what we need, though. Again, with the political parties as they are, we have, the whole conversation of every issue is dominated by the most extreme positions of either the left or the right. And, meanwhile, the middle people like me, that are being left out. And, when we talk about any issue you want to talk about, there's there's a Republican point of view and a Democratic point of view, and it's literally screaming from the most extreme positions one way or another. And I think, when I talk to people, when I walk around talking to people, that's not how most people are. Most people really are somewhere in the middle. And that's, I think, important.
Okay.
Those of us in the middle have been largely left out of the conversation.
And so now in 2016, right, we saw in the lead up to that election, there was a lot of talk about like the silent majority that was going to vote for Trump. That was always sort of the wild card factor. But you think that there's maybe a different silent majority that is becoming more and more left out?
I think so. And I think part of that was also the leading up to the election, there was sort of this air of inevitability of Clinton rather being president.
Right.
And when every news cast and every poll and every the whole thing points to the inevitability of a Clinton win, I think a lot of people then either didn't vote because they think it's inevitable, or they cast a protest vote of some sort. Mm-hmm. I know several people that wrote in Bernie Sanders, and it's not because they wanted Trump to win, right? They just didn't think that their vote really mattered.
Gotcha.
And so that's one of the things we have to fight against.
Okay.
We have to get people, average, everyday people involved.
Right. And now, again, you're sort of an unlikely candidate in that you haven't been very, or at least visibly involved in politics before this. So, I guess is that the main factor? Is just that you're frustrated? Would you say with how things are going?
I think there is some frustration, and if I were the only one frustrated, I wouldn't bother. But the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of people are, and a lot of people feel like they've been left out. And as far as the fact that I haven't really been in politics before, I think there's reasons for that too. Maybe I have to admit I've been a little complacent. When again, as part of that silent majority, just allowing things to kind of flow and buying into that kind of complacency.
Right. And now, in general, how do you think, would you be doing this if it was another person holding the office besides Tom Reed, or is there something specific about Reed's record that you disagree with?
Well, the main thing I have against Tom Reed is I don't feel like he represents me.
Okay.
He doesn't represent the people of the district, and one of the things I talk about is you look at where his money comes from. He raised something $3.1 million for the 2016 election, and of that, only the 0.1 was from small donors. Like people that actually live here.
Yeah.
The rest of it was from corporate and PACs and things like that, and most of that money came from outside of the district. And so looking at that, does he really represent me or the people that live here?
Okay.
Right? And, you know, one of the things, too, is then, you know, the kind of the conventional wisdom would be, oh, we'll elect a Democrat. But is that really different? I mean, they're going to be taking money from many of those same kind of places, one way or another. Maybe, you know, might be different large companies.
Gotcha,
right?
From different sides of the aisle, but it would be still.
But it's still
out
big
of
money,
district.
and you know, what about the rest of us?
Okay.
I guess that's part of my take.
Gotcha.
And you know, and of course, also I live here. I mean, I've lived here essentially my whole life,
Right.
and I know that the district. I have some idea, right, of the district and how people think and how people are. And, you know, a Democrat is really going to have a hard time in certain parts of the district.
Right, right.
And I think, you know, I like to think that I'm an alternative.
Okay. And that is one of the tricky things about this district is it's so big,
Right.
and there are sort of the loudest voices would seem to be like Tompkins County, where
Right.
it's very blue, whereas the surrounding places aren't at all blue.
Right. Yeah, people talk about like the Ithaca Tompkins County bubble.
Yeah, right.
And
of course,
you know, this is the edge of it. You know, right here.
Right.
You know, you can see it from
the edge of damn near everything. Yeah, right.
Yeah, you know, because you know, and even just when I was driving around before the election, you know, around here, it's easy to believe, you know, on this side, it's easy to see or easy to believe that, well, Clinton was going to win.
Okay.
Right, and it was easy to believe that.
Yeah.
But if you head west, that becomes less obvious, I guess you'd say.
Gotcha.
You know?
Okay, and so you think the best way forward then would be to sort of straddle those lines?
To some extent, yeah. And but even beyond that, it's not about straddling that line just so I can win. It's more recognizing that neither of those parties is really representing people anymore.
Gotcha.
That's the way I feel. I don't feel the Democrats represent me either.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. And now, as you know, you said obviously that you don't like how Reed, you know, it takes money from out of district.
Right.
That how most of his stuff doesn't represent the
Right.
people of his district. Do you have a certain campaign philosophy that would fight that? You know, for your campaign.
Well, you know, raising money is going to be really difficult, and especially because I'm not going to take money from political action committees or corporations
Gotcha.
at all. That's one of my campaign pledges.
Okay.
And so it's going to be hard for me to raise money, but I think that's fine. You know, I'd rather have a bunch of small donations from people who actually live here than a couple big ones from corporations that may not have anything to do with this part of the state.
Okay.
Or part of the country, for that matter.
Gotcha. And now I know you've attended some town halls, right?
Right.
You've tried to sort of get yourself out there in that way.
Yeah.
What other kind of plans do you have for that sort of you know, movement?
Well, it's going to be a lot of getting out and talking to people.
Okay.
You know, you know, talking to people I think is important. You know, and social media. I think social media, you know, the Facebook and different things like that is going to be a way to reach people. And so, you know, honestly, I'm really looking at trying to figure out some of those things.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
sort of flying, just sort of winging it, I guess.
I'm pretty much winging it right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
cool. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess is there any, you know, sort of, I guess if you had to boil down your campaign,
Right.
what do you think you would say if you had, you know, do you have a slogan? Do you have anything like that you're sort of operating with?
Well, I think the power needs to come back to the people.
Okay.
You know, the parties, both major parties have both let us down, and they've both made it pretty clear that they're mostly interested in fighting with each other rather than trying to reach any kind of solution.
Gotcha.
You know, and, you know, Tom Reed, for example, likes to tout his problem solver caucus over and over again and bipartisanship, but it just doesn't seem to be working. It doesn't seem to be the case at all.
Okay. Very interesting. Well, at this point, then, I think we'll head into the sort of specific policy stances, if that's okay. So, we'll start with the Second Amendment, obviously, especially in the wake of Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Every time that sort of thing happens, it gets brought up again, and sort of we go through the whole motions again. So, your general stance on the Second Amendment, what are your thoughts?
My general stance is that the Second Amendment is there for a reason, and we need to defend it. We need to support it, and keep it part of the law, really. At the same time, I think that we gun owners, and I do mean we, I have a few, right? Not a huge arsenal or anything, but I have a few. We gun owners have to be part of that conversation as to what that's really going to mean.
Okay.
And because when gun owners just refuse to be any part of the conversation is how we end up with something like the SAFE Act, which I don't agree with.
Okay.
Because it seems arbitrary, and you can kind of tell when the law is made by somebody who doesn't understand guns, I guess.
Okay.
6 rounds or whatever it is, which seems kind of silly, arbitrary.
Gotcha.
And I don't think it really addresses the main point. Not only keeping them out of the hands of people who have bad intentions,
right.
but also, how much, even if you have good intentions, how much firepower really is reasonable.
Okay, and that's what you view as the main. You said it doesn't address the main point. That's what you view as the main point.
Right, and and then that's where the gun owners and people who know guns need to be part of that conversation.
Okay.
Right.
And you think for the most part they exclude themselves from those conversations because they don't want anything like that.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and there's a lot of fear, I guess.
Okay.
And a lot of that fear comes from that side.
Yeah.
Where when Bill Clinton was elected, right? I was old enough to remember that, right?
Yeah.
So, people are just freaking out. Oh, they're going to take all the guns away. They're going to take all the guns away.
Right.
But it didn't happen,
okay.
right? Because it's not going to. He essentially can't, right? He can't just unilaterally take all your guns away.
Be tough, yeah.
Right. And then again when Obama got elected, he's going to take all the guns. Well, it still didn't happen.
Right. Okay.
Right. And now that Trump is president, have you been able to get all your guns back? All those guns that were seized from you. No, I mean, that's absurd. So, I think both sides need to take a deep breath, and let's find something that makes sense.
Okay. Now, as a gun owner,
and on a national level.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because state lines are pretty porous. I mean, having really strict laws in one state and essentially no laws in the state next door doesn't make sense either.
Now, as a gun owner,
right.
I think a lot of people would blame the fear-mongering about Democratic presidents taking guns on the NRA.
Right.
So are you a member of the NRA, and how do you feel about the power they wield nationally?
No, I'm not a member of the NRA. I think, one of the things we talk about in Washington more generally is, special interest groups.
Okay.
And the NRA is a special interest group.
Right.
Even if it's your special interest, it's a special interest group.
Gotcha.
And, they spend plenty of money on lobbying, and, and again, it goes back to a lot of the big money in Washington.
Yeah. Okay, and then I guess we move on to abortion, to the Roe v. Wade type of discussion. Where do you stand on abortion? That's again seems to be pretty much always a hot topic.
It's always an issue. It will never go away. But I have to support a woman's right to choose.
Okay.
It comes basically back to the idea of her body, her choice, and I think that's the most basic argument to be made.
Gotcha.
And it used to be, I thought there was some sort of compromise, some sort of middle ground we could reach.
Okay.
With say banning late-term abortions, right?
Oh, third trimester type
right,
stuff. Okay.
And because I think most people find that to be at least somewhat reasonable.
Okay.
Right. But then, of course, you have to make some provision for or recognition of the health of the woman involved.
Right.
And for some reason, that was just a bridge too far for some people, which I just don't understand. Because of course, the health of this person has to be of the utmost importance.
Right.
And unfortunately, even with that, then we have, various state governments then trying to roll it back even further. Now it's not the third trimester, now it's the second trimester. Right. And things like, just things that don't even make sense, like the thing where, I'm not sure the state, I'll probably get it wrong, but, where if a woman is raped and gets pregnant, she's supposed to get the permission from her rapist to get an abortion.
I feel like I've heard this, yeah, okay.
It's
absurd.
At some
point, that was
the fact that anybody would think that is just absurd to me, and I can't go there.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, now do you think the federal government should be involved in things like Planned Parenthood? That's often a sort of a target for the right.
And it's one of the Tom Reed targets too.
Right, yeah,
right.
Right. Certainly.
And yeah, I think, especially with the debate on healthcare, and Planned Parenthood does a lot of things. I don't go there because I don't need to, right? But I recognize that some people, for them, that is an important part of their healthcare, with screenings and various, health-related things.
Yeah, services.
And then, part of that also is, Tom Reed is one of those guys, too, that it seems like every year they pass another bill prohibiting federal funds to be used for abortion.
Okay.
Right? But that's already the case. But they keep passing the same bill so they can pretend that they did something
kind of
in
a
Washington.
show. Okay.
And that's, I'm tired of the political theater, too.
Okay. All right, fair, yeah. And then we move on to the country's relationship with Russia, particularly under the microscope now with current investigation into President Trump's contacts with Russia, all that. How do you view the relationship, or how should it be with Russia going forward?
Well, I think everybody wants to have better relations throughout the world, and that includes Russia. Having an actual relationship where we can talk and sort out problems, like in the Middle East or wherever.
Yeah.
At the same time, we have to recognize that Russia is not our ally, and Putin is not our friend.
Okay.
And it goes back to even the treaties we had way back in the Reagan administration, right? The trust but verify.
Okay.
Right. We have to keep in mind that Vladimir Putin wants to put Russia first. Right.
Right.
He's not
looking out for us. Yeah.
Right. He's not looking out for us, and to think he would be is kind of absurd.
Okay.
So I think on the one hand we need to have a good relationship. On the other hand, we can't just trust him or think he's on our side.
Okay.
Especially when we're looking at the things they do, meddling in elections. They've obviously meddled in our election this last cycle. We can debate how much effect it had, but there's no doubt that they meddled. And they've meddled in other elections in Europe and places too.
Okay.
So
it's
not unprecedented.
Right. Sure. And now this is one of the issues, it seems like, that over the past 4 years, back in the 2012 election, it seemed like being better with Russia was sort of a Democrat thing, right? That was sort of something that they thought, well, we should have good relations with Russia.
Right.
And then it has sort of flipped now, where Democrats are like, we should cut off all contact with Russia, and the right has taken more the former position of the left, where that we should try and be on good terms. But your stated thing would be more of a middle ground.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, the flip. I swear, if one party wants one thing, the other party is just going to take the opposite position,
natural move. Okay.
Regardless of the actual circumstance.
Gotcha.
And it goes back to it doesn't have to be an all or nothing either. Like I said, we can have better relations with Russia, but it has to be a relation that's built on some amount of suspicion. I think we have to, we can be friends, but we can't be best friends, I guess. You
Gotcha.
know what I mean?
Okay, yeah. They get invited to some parties, but not all the parties. Okay,
yeah,
that's fair. Totally.
They can't come to my party.
right, yeah. Now, in terms of climate change, as we move on to climate change now, do you, I guess first off, do you believe it exists?
Of course.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of evidence, whether it's the receding glaciers or, the data, and even within my own life. I mean, I've noticed. I've lived here long enough, so I know that we get a lot less snow than we ever did.
Okay.
Right, and we have what seems like a really cold, nasty winter, but then if you look at it from a historical perspective, that was actually pretty average. Right, and so even within my own short little lifespan, it's changed, and it's continuing to do so. So it's real for sure.
And then sort of the natural follow-up is, do you believe it's man-made?
I think it's at least partially.
Okay.
We can argue the details, right? And the Earth does go through its own cycles of climate and weather changes and stuff. But we're pumping huge amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. Okay. And I do believe that is having an effect.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay. And now to sort of a subset of that discussion is the fracking issue. Obviously, it's been a couple years since Governor Cuomo has outlawed that in New York State, to the detriment of some cities. Like Elmira has certainly felt the brunt of that. Part of the southern parts of the state. Where do you stand on that? Do you believe the ban is justified?
I think it's justified, at least for now.
Okay.
My basic take on the fracking in New York is kind of in a case of emergency, break shale. Right. That's kind of like what I like to think of it as, because. For right now, it's fracking is going on a lot in Pennsylvania, for example.
Okay.
And there's some question as to how that's affecting, their groundwater and, the health of the people who live there. And so I think taking a step, to wait and see how that pans out is useful.
Gotcha.
Also, right now, with, because there's been so much of it, natural gas prices have come down, and so now would seem to be the worst possible time to do it, right? Why would you want to frack when the prices are down?
Okay.
So, if we wait, say we wait a decade, right, it'll still be there. And if, improvements in the technology have made it more safe, or we've proven that it's more safe, then, well, maybe we could at least revisit it.
Okay.
And maybe by then the prices will be up. It'll make more sense to actually break it then.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
So in your mind, it's sort
and
of...
if we're really lucky, right, enough alternative energy will have, and renewables will be it, so we won't even need it.
Erase the need altogether.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
You
So for you, the wait and see approach for now, but doors open in the future.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, fair. Now, in your mind, what is the largest issue facing the U.S. economy?
Wow. Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's, just the world economy.
Okay.
The world economy, again, going through its own phases and transitions, and, we're part of that. And so we're going to have to figure out how to work on a more international level.
Okay.
And I think part of that, too, is the idea that, we should be looking at this from a national kind of perspective. How does the United States compete on a world stage?
Gotcha.
Rather than, each individual state trying to lure a business, or, a locale trying to lure a business for their own little economy. I think we need to take a broader and more long-term approach.
Okay. And so that is a big topic also, globalization versus sort of isolationism.
Right.
And where would you say you fall on the spectrum of those two things?
Oh, I definitely more on the global scale, because, people like to think that maybe if we isolate ourselves, we put up little walls and trade tariffs and barriers, that we'll be better off. But I think what will really happen is we'll just get left behind.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because China's not going to slow down.
Right.
Europe is not going to slow down. And you've got emerging economies in Southeast Asia, right? And to just try and back away from that and not be a part of it just means we're going to get left behind.
Okay. Okay. So
and that would be that's a really detrimental, especially long term.
Right.
Right, and we do need to take a longer view of things.
Okay.
All right. Instead of just this quarter's profit report.
Right.
Or,
right. And we do get focused on the smaller numbers. You're right. Yeah.
And like the stock market, they're reporting every day whether it's up or down. Really, I don't think that's a good judge of the economy as a whole at all.
Okay. Okay. So you think it's just too small sample size to take anything from?
Well, and it's too volatile, and it's again, what happens today is important, but what happens this year, I think, is even more important.
Fair. Right. Yeah. Now we'd move on to healthcare. The big national debate, obviously, is between universal healthcare and the ongoing efforts by the Republicans to repeal the Affordable Care Act, leaving in some parts, but making it more of their own system. So where do you stand on that spectrum?
Well, I I think I'm basically on the side of the universal healthcare, whether it's a single payer or whatever we want to call it, and I and that's mostly from a pragmatic standpoint. I think it just makes sense.
Okay.
As far as the ACA repeal, the Republicans have been trying to repeal that since day one, and they've been beating that drum for so long. I don't think they've ever had a plan for replacement.
Gotcha.
They like to talk about repeal and replace, but I don't think they ever had a plan to replace it. And so, moving forward, whatever we decide to do, I think we should come up with the replacement first.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And come up with something that actually is going to work. Along with that, there's, we have an opportunity, I think. We can look at the systems in Europe and in Canada, right? And we can pick out the parts of those things that work and look at the things that don't work. And I think we can come up with a system that's even better.
Okay. Okay. So, now, and would you say, in your estimation, I think people pretty much universally would say the ACA didn't do everything they wanted it to, right? It didn't work perfectly. The reasons for that, would probably change based on your party affiliation.
Right. Yeah.
But would you say, how do you think it's been? Would you call the ACA a success?
I think it was a limited success. I think it maybe didn't go far enough in some ways.
Okay.
And I think the reliance on the existing, commercial insurance market was part of its problem. And it's part of what's, again, especially now with these, Trump signing the order to stop the subsidy payments.
Right. Yeah, recently.
It's sort of brought that to light, like some of the problem with that.
Okay.
So, moving forward, I think we have to, we have to get away from that.
Okay.
To be honest.
Fair. Okay. And then moving on to access to higher education. I believe Obama sort of kicked around the idea of community college being free.
Right.
And obviously there's sort of a wider call from the more far left to make sort of all higher education free, or at least increase access. Where would you stand?
Well, I'm definitely in favor of more access and more affordability. I'm not sure I would go as far as free.
Okay.
And maybe that's my own perspective. I put myself through college and paid student loans for many years,
Sure.
right? At the same time, I think, because I did pay for it, I had more at stake, and I took it more seriously than I might have otherwise.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I would agree with making it more affordable. I'm not sure I'd go to free. But at the same time, well, New York has basically gone that way for the first 2 years,
Right.
I'm willing to see how it goes.
Okay.
Right, and if that model works, then let's go for it.
Okay.
And
obviously, right, you said New York's been going that way. They do have, I believe, tuition-free SUNY schools, right?
Right. Yeah. From what I understand, it's the state schools, first 2 years, 2-year degree.
Okay.
And I was talking to somebody, and again, I don't know the details, but apparently that's along with trade schools and vocational as well. Because I think that's important too.
Okay. All right. And then I think we are probably running close to our time here, so would you mind if we moved on to the biographical portion of the interview?
Okay. Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Cool. So yeah, could you tell me? Did you grow up in Tompkins County?
Yeah. Actually, when I was in high school, I lived about a mile and a half that way.
Oh, okay.
I went to Trumansburg for school. I've basically lived here most of my life, except when I was in the Navy, and then when I went to school, in college.
Yeah.
Had a couple jobs outside, but then I ended up coming back here.
Okay. And
I've actually lived here for 17 years now.
Wow. Okay. And where did you go to college?
I went to Alfred State to begin with, and then Clarkson University to finish up my bachelor's.
Gotcha. And
aeronautical engineering.
Aeronautical engineering. Boy. Okay. That sort of outweighs my journalism degree. I don't know how, but yeah.
It was tough. I know that.
Yeah, I bet.
Especially I was in the Navy for 4 years. Mm-hmm. Didn't do any math for 4 years.
Oh, really?
What would I do in the Navy, right? And then jumped right into calculus and calculus-based physics and.
So yeah, we'd pick up. I did have a question about where. So you went straight out of high school into the Navy.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long? That was 4 years in the Navy.
4 years in the Navy.
Gotcha. And then you got your degrees.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I went off to school after that.
Okay. All right. And what were you doing to work yourself through college?
Actually, I used the GI Bill, and actually one of the benefits of New York was at least the first 2 years they called it job training at that time. So my first 2 years was actually pretty much a free ride.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But then when I went to Clarkson, I ended up, going into some student loan debt and,
Gotcha.
Paid for that for several years. So.
Okay. Now, let me think. And what did you, I know you had a job at Cornell. What were you doing there?
Actually, I was welding science equipment together.
Okay.
If you've ever heard of the ERL, it's this...
I think I have, yeah.
Yeah, it's the newest iteration of a particle accelerator.
Okay.
And I did all the welds to weld that together.
Boom, very cool.
Superconductive radio frequency cavities.
About that, okay, interesting.
So it's pretty specialized.
Yeah, and then I know, how long did you work at Cornell?
15 years.
15 years, wow. And but I know not recently, but at some point you did lose your job there, correct?
Yeah, because of the way the science funding works, they lost funding for that project, and since that's pretty much the only project I've been working on, I got let go, got laid off.
Okay.
And since then I've been working for myself, doing glass art, and trying to eke out a living that way.
Gotcha.
So.
And yeah, could you explain to me a little bit? I'm not familiar with the glass art sort of, or anyone who's a glass artist. So explain to me that process.
Well, in my case, what I'm doing is I take an image and I have to mess with it a lot to get a black and white image, basically.
Okay.
Use what's called a photoresist to mask off portions, and then actually carve into the glass with a sandblaster. Trying to carve in and get some depth and some texture.
Okay.
And then when I use paint, I use either metallic or automotive type paints to bring out the image in a way I think it looks really cool.
Okay.
And it's something that as far as I know, nobody else is doing.
Yeah,
which is important.
Absolutely, finding a niche. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, are you're running your own business then?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and that's been. I'm sorry if you mentioned this. How long has that been?
It's been 2.5+ years.
Okay.
A little over 2.5 years now.
Okay, and you think that's sort of your long-term plan at this point?
Well, when I initially had planned on doing that sort of as my retirement income.
Oh,
you
okay.
know, I was going to retire as soon as I could, and go on to doing that. And then so when I got laid off, I was like, you know, let's see if I can make it work.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Fair. And I guess that might be all I have, really.
Yeah. So I was going to mention, so the other part of running as an independent and not being a part of the parties, I have, you know, my basic theory is that part of the problem in Washington is kind of two problems that would seem to mitigate each other, but seem to be making it worse.
Okay.
And that's, first of all, you know, we've got a bare majority in Congress, one way or another.
Yeah.
And, you know, it switches.
Yeah.
Right? But that bare majority is part of the problem in that whoever has that majority, and it's the Republicans right now, are able to set the agenda and kind of push things and bully their way through whatever they want.
Yeah.
Whereas then, on the flip side, is that then the margin is so close, when they actually come to vote, it gets gridlocked.
Gotcha.
And so part of my theory is that if we can get enough independent candidates, independent representatives, we can solve both of those problems and deprive both parties of that advantage.
Okay.
And become kind of the deal makers in between.
Gotcha. Now that's a pretty tall hill to climb, right? Because it's not technically a two-party country, but it is in operational sense.
In every effective way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, do you think? I mean, I guess, do you view the thoughts that you have about the parties being non-representative of the people, and sort of needing to do away with that system? That's always sort of been kind of a thing that gets talked about but never really happens.
Well, and you know, we've had parties since the beginning, but they're not always the same.
True.
Right.
True.
And when's the last time a Tory or a Whig was elected? right.
Fair. Yeah.
And so you know, the things are going to change.
Okay.
You know, and we can be a part of that change, or we can fight it.
Gotcha. But you view now, I guess, as sort of a crucial element in that movement.
Yeah, I think so.
I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
You know, change is upon us.
Fair enough.
You know
Okay.
I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, Brian, thank you for sitting down with us,
thanks
and
for,
and good luck on your campaign.
Thank you.
All right.
Good to see you.
Not a problem.